Have you ever really, truly stopped and asked yourself where your sense of self comes from? That I that you are day in and day out. Well, today, we're going to peel back the layers on that question, and it all starts with one of the first, most fundamental moments of our lives, seeing ourselves in the mirror. I mean, really think about it. Was it just there when you were born, a solid, unchangeable core? Or was it built, piece by piece, from the outside in? Let's dig in, because I promise you the answer is way stranger and way more interesting than you probably think. So, our whole story kicks off with something that seems super simple. Something that happens to all of us when we're just tiny babies, somewhere between 6 and 18 months old. The psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan gave it a name, the mirror stage, and he argued this is the exact moment our ego, our sense of I, is actually born. Now check this out. If you put a mirror in front of a chimpanzee, yeah, they might be curious for a second, but they pretty quickly figure out it's just a reflection and move on. A human baby, though, totally different story. They are absolutely captivated. Lacan called their reaction jubilation, just this pure joy and fascination with the image they see. So, what's going on here? Why are we so different? Well, to get why that baby is so happy, you have to understand what it feels like to be that baby. Before the mirror, an infant experiences its body as what's called a corpus morcellale, which basically means a fragmented body. It's just chaos, a jumble of feelings, needs, and limbs that don't quite work together. There's no sense of unity, no real control. And then, bam, they see this, the imago. For the very first time in that reflection, the infant sees a whole, complete person. That image is coordinated, it's unified, it's everything the baby feels like it isn't, and that image is like this incredible, powerful promise of what they could be one day. It's a vision of future control. But, and this is the big twist, Lacan says this whole moment is a méconnaissance, a huge misrecognition. The baby joyfully thinks, hey, that's me, but it's not. It's an image. It's an external, idealized picture. So from the very beginning, our sense of self, our I, is built by identifying with something that is fundamentally outside of us. It's built on something other. Okay, so this whole mirror thing, it's not a solo act. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. In fact, it's a deeply, deeply social moment. Think about it. The baby sees this amazing reflection, and what's the first thing it does? It turns around, looks at its parent or whoever is holding them, almost as if to ask, is that me? And when the caregiver smiles back and says, yes, look, that's you, that's it. That's the moment it's locked in. The identification is sealed. That one little act of confirmation throws the child headfirst into what Lacan calls the imaginary order. You can think of this as the dimension of our minds that's all about images, illusions, and our relationships. It's the world where our ego is born, not from some deep inner place, but through the validating look of someone else. Now you might be thinking, okay, so we get a sense of self. That sounds like a good thing. But according to Lacan, this whole process comes with a pretty big price tag, a permanent feeling of alienation from our true selves. And here's the problem. Our ego, what we think of as our most internal self, gets built around that imago, that external, perfect image. Our identity is literally built from the outside in. We spend our lives thinking we're this solid core on the inside, when really, we're a reflection of something that was always outside of us to begin with. This leads to something called aphanesis, which means the fading of the subject. Basically, to become that whole put-together person that we see in the mirror and that others recognize, we have to push down that messy, chaotic, but maybe more authentic, internal world. We start trying to live up to the image. And get this dynamic doesn't just stop when we're toddlers. Oh no. It follows us our entire lives, and it shapes our social world in ways we almost never notice. I love this quote because it's so true. As adults, we're still living in that economy of glances. Our sense of who we are feels solid only when it's being reflected back at us and approved by our family, our friends, our boss. We're constantly, whether we admit it or not, looking to other people to tell us that we are who we think we are. And that is why being truly vulnerable is so unbelievably terrifying. When we risk getting rejected by someone we care about, it's not just about hurt feelings. It feels like a threat to our entire existence. If they don't recognize the me I'm showing them, it can feel like my whole reality is just dissolving. Okay, so our psychological self is built on an outside image. That's already a lot to take in. But here's where it gets really wild. This exact same structure is baked into the very language we use every single day. Let's take a super simple sentence. Luigi eats the apple. Easy, right? You can picture that in your head. But what about a sentence like, time flies? Time doesn't really have wings. It can't fly. It's a metaphor. And we have to use a metaphor like that because to talk about something abstract like time, we're forced to describe it like it's a concrete visual thing. This trick is called reification. It just means treating an idea like it's a physical object. We can't really wrap our heads around time by itself, so we have to turn it into something we can see. We imagine it as a river flowing or a line we're walking on or, something with wings. It seems like to even speak, we first have to visualize. So, if our language is always forcing us to see things, to visualize them, that leads to a really important question. From whose point of view are we doing all this seeing? And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. And it's captured perfectly in this little I pun from the theorist Homi Bhabha. The idea is that every time a subjective I speaks, there's always an invisible I behind it, an observer who is seeing the world from a very specific and never neutral perspective. What this means is that there's no such thing as a view from nowhere. Every single statement we make implies an observer, and the language itself isn't neutral either. The language we're born into, the one we inherit, it's packed with a history, with biases, and with a default point of view that it's constantly trying to get us to adopt without us even noticing. And this really is the biggest takeaway of all. Just like our ego is first formed by seeing ourselves as an other in the mirror, the language we use to describe other people, other places, other ideas, it actually reveals a ton about who we are. Our descriptions are always, in some way, a self-portrait. So here's the thought I want to leave you with. The next time you're describing the world, or a person, or an idea, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what am I revealing about my own worldview right now? What invisible I is doing the seeing? And what does that perspective say about the I behind it?